Denver Broncos key free agent signing Dre Greenlaw suffered an injury scare during workouts, but we'll tell you why it's nothing to be worried about. Broncos Country on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day. Thank you so much to everyone out there in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you haven't done so already, if you're not yet an everydayer, become one. It's super easy. Hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll be brought up to date every single day, all year long, and all the latest going on with your Denver Broncos, the best Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. As always, I'm your host, Cody Roark, Broncos credential reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com.
And look, Broncos Country, we've got a lot of jam-packed action to get to you here today. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there, Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. And here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show, Broncos Country. We're going to dive deep into the Dre Greenlaw injury scare that occurred during workouts last week before the NFL draft. He'll be ready to go for training camp, but what should we look into with this? We'll dive deep into that. Also, we'll go over the Broncos undrafted rookie free agent class of 2025 on offense and on defense. Could the Broncos be taking a look at the wide receiver position with the number of guys that they added as UDFAs? Could there be some defensive gems as undrafted guys that could make some noise here during OTAs, going into training camp, and maybe even the preseason? We'll highlight that much more in today's episode of the show. Sayre, big news, obviously a little bit of a Sunday scare for everyone in Broncos Country when some affiliate, some NBC Sports affiliate out there in San Francisco put a report out there that Broncos linebacker who spent time with San Francisco last season, Dre Greenlaw, he suffered a major injury. That's what they're calling it, a major or a serious injury during workouts, and is expected to miss a significant time in the regular season. That report came out, and everybody was like, what the heck? What's going on here? But luckily, when you have local reporters do some background on it, you find out Dre Greenlaw just suffers a quad strain. He's going to miss time in the offseason program, but is expected to be ready for training camp. How was that for you, finding out that initially?
I mean, I was glad that I kind of found out the second piece of news before the first, right? Because that would have sent me, and I know I sent a lot of people into kind of a frenzy on a Sunday night when you're kind of just like, okay, the draft just went down. We're starting to look at the undrafted players for the Broncos, trying to, picture this depth chart and picture how guys fit into it. And then all of a sudden, just remember last year, it was reported well after the draft that like Drew Sanders had ruptured his Achilles or torn his Achilles during those same workouts. Right. And so it was believable at the beginning. And then I think it got even to the point that Dre Greenlaw himself addressed it. So it was, a fracas of, I guess, people just kind of going on and reading into everything. And you certainly can't lose this guy, though. It kind of put into perspective just where the Broncos are at linebacker that, hey, hypothetically speaking, knock on wood, if Dre Greenlaw would get hurt, this would be almost an emergency sort of scenario for this team.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's where I was going to go here because, Sayre, it kind of puts things into perspective that, okay, hey, like the Broncos, obviously the good news is this happened before the NFL draft. If this injury was serious and he was going to miss a significant amount of time, don't you think the Broncos would have drafted an inside linebacker? I mean, they drafted an edge rusher in Jonah Ellis after the Drew Sanders one, but the Drew Sanders stuff came out after the draft. I think there's a reason at times where information like this comes out after the draft, especially if it happens during the week of voluntary, off-season, conditioning, things like that. Because maybe if that information gets out, it could be used as like a smokescreen or a decoy, which I don't know if the league wants that to necessarily be the case, but ultimately, he suffered a quad strain, and obviously quads are soft tissue, and that's something that Bo Lowry is going to obviously get to work with right away. And I put it in my article over there at milehighsports.com in terms of the background of this. Now that he suffered the injury, he's going to be put on a treatment plan and a transition to obviously get back to where he was playing here with Bo Lowry. who's done tremendous wonders in terms of getting guys back from injuries. Now, part of, you want to wonder, is this just like a one-time thing? Is this something that the Broncos should be concerned about going in the regular season? I think it's something that you absolutely have to monitor, right? Because it's a guy who's barely over a year and a half removed from suffering a torn Achilles in this 49ers Super Bowl loss to the Chiefs. He missed a majority of the regular season. He came back in 2 games and balled out, was unbelievable in those 2 games there. But the 49ers were out of playoff contention, and he started to experience some calf tightness or soreness, which usually after you have an Achilles injury, that's one sign. It's like, hey, all right, we got to peel the curtains back a little bit. They held him out for, I think, the last couple of games of the season just to, be on the safe side and say, hey, we want to negotiate to bring you back as a free agent. He ends up in Denver, which we all knew, Sayre. I mean, you love the player. You love signing the guy. But obviously, signing a player who's coming off of a major injury like that, there is risk involved with that. And certainly, I think this definitely percolated the ears a little bit of Broncos country, who had those concerns about his injury history. But ultimately, this shouldn't be a sign of concern. But I do think it is worth monitoring as training camp happens. He's expected to be ready for the start of it, which is in July, mid-July. I've got the date. I don't know if I'm allowed to officially announce it yet, as when players are going to officially report. But it's coming. But he's expected to be ready for that.
Yeah, this was kind of reported, the secondary reports anyway, as like this will be weeks, not months, right? So that's exciting news for the Denver Broncos. And like you said, hopefully kind of stuff creeping up now gets them into a good plan to where he can be fresh and ready to go for the season. But you can't help but be a little bit worried about the off-ball linebacker spot, where Alex Singleton is coming back from a knee injury and he's in his early 30s. Like, those 2 things do matter in conjunction with one another. I think that's a big deal. And then obviously now you have Dre Greenlaw with the injury scare here. Even if it is a strained quad, I mean, it's popping up on the radar. And Drew Sanders coming off a year in which he was injured. So those are concerns that, to me, it's enough to get ahead of the same problem you had last year, where you're bringing in Quan Alexander, you're bringing in Christian Welch, you're bringing in Zach Cunningham. You don't want to be in that situation again, to where, all right, we're going to monitor the waiver wire for a guy at linebacker that's going to literally come in and play for us in week 1 against Seattle. Remember, Christian Welch played over other guys in week 1 against Seattle. That's how down bad the Broncos were at the linebacker spot. And so I would be out there shopping right now. I know Jawan Bentley is available. I don't know what his health status is, though. So, I mean, it would require the Broncos to obviously have had something on the table already. But if I was them, I'd be going out and looking at somebody to bring in and see if that person can contribute this season.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to be able to look at maybe some veteran options that could be out there. I don't have a list pulled up in front of me right now, but obviously the Broncos did get a couple of linebackers as undrafted rookie free agents. And also I know that there's a couple of rookie minicamp invites for some, lower level D2, D3 guys. Rookie minicamps expected to be next week. This is definitely worth monitoring because of those things. And now you're fortunate enough, hey, it's like, okay, you brought Justin Sternad back, into the mix. He's going to be competing for the starting job with Alex Singleton and Drew Sanders. But I wonder what the Broncos' plan and vision is for this position if there is an injury there. And you wonder if there's a contingency plan. But what I can tell Broncos country about this injury, about Dre Greenlaw, the moment the injury happened, you go through, you get the evaluation, from the team's medical staff. He'll be going through rehab and recovery at the team facility. But also what happens when you have an injury is that Bo Lowry will go through, and this is something that happens, when you do a physical as well. They go through and they see if there's any deficiencies, like soft tissue deficiencies, musculoskeletal issues, or whatever it may be, like misalignment. Things like that can cause soft tissue injuries. Like if you're out of alignment and you're moving a certain way and you do explosive movement, it could lead to a soft tissue injury. So they'll go through, and I guarantee you Bo Lowry's already done this. They probably have tested Dre Greenlaw to see if there's any deficiencies in his muscles, whatever it may be, or his skeletal mass, whatever it may be, in those categories, just to see like, hey, is there something that could have prevented this further? Or is this just like, hey, you pulled your quad, you got a strain? I know quad injuries, they're tough, they're tricky. Sometimes they could be 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll see exactly where things are at with Dre Greenlaw. But the expectation is that he will be good to go for the start of training camp. Broncos Country, on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about the Broncos linebacker position if, in fact, Dre Greenlaw does have another injury that pops up for him this season? Make sure you let us know here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, wherever you get your podcast. But we're not done yet. Broncos Country, we're going to talk about the Broncos undrafted rookie free agents. We're going to tell you why wide receiver could be the one position they take a longer look at on the offensive side of the ball with their undrafted class of 2025. You'll get that much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go, right? Between dining out, eating out, online shopping, entertainment. I mean, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's the complete financial command center that you need, where you can track all your accounts, all your investments, and all your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth.
Well, Sayre, the one thing I like about it is that you learn a lot of surprising insights about your spending habits. And my fiance and I were getting ready to have our wedding here in just about a month, and then we're getting ready for our honeymoon 2 months from now. And it's good to know how much we spend on coffee when we go out or when we go about, or how much we spend going out to dinner. So allowing that, having that information, those insights allows us to refocus and recenter the picture. Say, okay, hey, we can't go out and get coffee. We can't go out to restaurants this month. We got to save up for our wedding. We got to save up for the honeymoon. That's one thing I like about Monarch Money. And plus, on top of that, easy collaboration with my fiance. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts. You can set goals and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The Denver Broncos are no strangers to finding undrafted free agent gems. So who's it going to be this year? Well, we've got some picks on offense for you here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos to be watching out for as the offseason progresses. And hey, everybody, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Every single day, we appreciate you so much. If you haven't already become an everyday listener, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube, so that you get us at the top of your feed all off season long. We're going to be breaking down all the players on the roster, Cody, and just as we promised, going through the undrafted free agents. The Broncos, they are one of the best teams in NFL history, and I know that there's a number of other teams that are good at this, but just historically speaking, they have kind of good luck with undrafted players. You can talk about Rod Smith. You can talk about, more modern guys like Chris Harris Jr. and so many players in between. But this year's free agent class, first of all, I want to point out that it's very surprising to me there's no running backs in this list. I think that was one of the most, probably the biggest standout thing about the 15 players the Broncos signed to me. Yeah, what does that mean? No running backs among undrafted free agents. Very uncommon. But I think the skill position group in particular, that could be an area to watch for somebody to potentially crack this roster.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at every option. To your point about the running back position, the Broncos, that's how they discovered Jaleel McLaughlin. I remember going to a rookie minicamp and like, man, this kid can move. This guy's a guy who's going to probably make the roster at some point. I said, don't be surprised if he does. Luckily, he was able to do it, and obviously he's still in the mix for the running back spot. I want to stay on this running back topic here for just a minute. The fact that they don't have a guy, right, can mean one of two things. First off, obviously they added R.J. Harvey in the NFL draft. They had him alongside Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, Blake Watson, and obviously Tyler Bidet. That means that, okay, it's either they like that room and all those guys are really going to compete for probably what we assume would be the 3 running back spots that Sean Payton will hold on the 53-man roster, or it means that they can still add a veteran guy who's out there and still available to bring into the mix, right? Like a Nick Chubb or a J.K. Dobbins. I know I still see on social media a lot of Broncos fans asking for something like that. So we'll find out. We are fixing to find out how they view the running back room, whether they're going to stay with the guys in-house or if they're going to look essentially to bring in one of these available free agents still to maybe add a veteran into the room. I'm very curious to see what Sean's going to do, but I want to talk about the offensive side of the ball. I mean, Sayre, they bring in 3 wide receivers. I think one of the more notable guys is Jerwan Newton, wide receiver out of Toledo here. You see guys who have speed, guys who have 4.4 or 4.3 speed they've brought into the mix here. Your thoughts on the wide receiver room here? Because I think that's an interesting thing, because this can either be like, hey, we want to add and just see what happens, or going into training camp, this is always the one position room that usually has 15 guys, 14 to 15 guys, and that mix throughout the entire month of July and training camp in August. So your thoughts on the wide receiver room here?
Yeah, I think you add a number of guys here with, like you mentioned, kind of a speed, athletic profile that you typically will try to target amongst undrafted free agents. You mentioned Jerwan Newton, a fast, smaller receiver, kind of just looking over his time at the college level. Guy's first year at Toledo was all the way back in 2019. So he's been at the college level trying to figure things out for quite some time, which is no big deal, right? I mean, you can find these guys at any age range or anything like that. Somebody who did get quite a bit of hype I saw on Twitter, Cody, was Joaquin Davis from North Carolina Central. Had a really nice pro day at the HBCU showcase that they did, and ran a 4.440, had like a 40.5-inch vertical, I think, something like that. And he's a bigger body guy, 12 special teams tackles last year. So I kind of like that note. That's one of my favorite notes, I think, about a player is, when you're not saying, hey, this guy dominated with 1,500 receiving yards and 18 touchdowns, but it's like, no, this guy had 12 special teams tackles playing at North Carolina State. The guys who excel at special teams, they love football, and that gives them a fighting chance, I think, going into the offseason program. So it's going to be tough on this roster as currently constructed with the way the Broncos have invested in certain guys to make the team, but I wouldn't put it past Sean Payton, who we know they put the names on the helmet. They are all about the competition all throughout the offseason. So I think that'll be fascinating. What's really interesting about this UDFA class too, and you can vamp out the wide receivers as well, but wide receivers, they got 3 of them. And then they got 4 interior offensive linemen from this undrafted free agent class. No running backs, no tight ends, no quarterbacks, no fullbacks. So just 2 position groups really being covered here. And it might end up being that the interior offensive line is really where you have somebody that could crack this team.
Yeah, I imagine with Clay Webb, they may look at him as a guard center, kind of those hybrid guys. Joe Machowski, obviously at Oklahoma State, he's a center. Xavier Truss out of Georgia, probably a hybrid 2-way player, center guard. I imagine that's probably the envisioned status for him. Probably we should touch on this because I know this has been brought up on social media. The Broncos bringing in Clay Webb from Jack State. My thought on this, obviously, if you don't know, he's currently involved in an ongoing lawsuit that has been going on for quite some time, dating back some of the details. I'm not going to give the description as to what happened. You can look that up yourself. But he's involved essentially in a really, I don't even know if you want to call it a hazing incident. I think it does fall under the hazing category in a sense. But he did something very unspeakable to a teammate. And that kind of stuff right here, when I heard of this, I thought to myself, like, wait, why are the Broncos bringing him in? Now, obviously, there's some talent there because, as you mentioned on some draft boards, he had a 5th-round grade from some analysts out there. Ultimately, he goes undrafted. He's a former 5-star high school offensive lineman. But my thought on this one, Sayre, is the Broncos and Sean Payton talk so much about having high character, high quality character in the locker room. You don't want to bring in guys who don't necessarily fit that. We've looked at guys who are captains. Or you look at the Broncos draft class, they brought in a ton of guys who are captains, who are great teammates. I'm very curious as to why Clay Webb is getting an opportunity here, considering what happened. And look, I understand young men make mistakes. Their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, till they're 25, not to excuse it. That what he did, though, is inexcusable. And I understand as a young person, you probably don't think about your, things like that. I'd made plenty of mistakes in my life where I did something I didn't think. But this right here is just something that is never allowed in the locker room at the high school level, certainly not tolerated at the college level. So I'm curious as what the appeal is here for Webb.
Yeah, I mean, he 5-star prospect back in 2019. And like you mentioned, originally committed to Georgia, high school wrestler. I think just the whole thing that's off the field is it's one of those situations to where, yeah, like you said, people do stupid stuff and some more regrettable than others. And obviously the Broncos, either they feel the punishment was worth the crime for him going undrafted and probably missing out on a huge signing bonus or whatever the case may be, or they visited with him at the combine and wherever else they met with him because he was still invited to the combine. This wasn't a situation to where, like, you know, there's a lot of controversial players every year in the NFL draft, and guys like Mike Green probably dealing with a little bit more serious stuff in terms of getting like ownership involved. This is one of those personal character things where you're really asking like the guy himself, but then also maybe people who knew him or people who have played with him at the college level or things like that. Like, hey, was this just a stupid mistake that he made? And like you said, everybody can go kind of Google that story for themselves and see, but you just kind of hope that it's a situation to where, okay, he made his mistake. He's paying his dues for it now. Like you said, there's still an ongoing lawsuit.
I think this was in 2018 too, I believe, when this actually took place, like 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
So it is in the distant past at this point, but it's still something that obviously NFL teams, you hear about this on a guy's record and you still are like, all right, we can't draft this guy, right? We can't, because that one mistake that you made at one point can cost you everything when it comes to the NFL draft. And so I'm interested to see maybe what the Broncos thought process is here, Cody, because really this is the type of situation that they have very, very much stayed away from under George Payton for sure, but especially since Sean Payton came to town. Like, the Broncos really haven't brought in many character flaw players or guys with checkered past. So I'm interested by that aspect of this as well.
I'm eager to see what comes about it. I mean, obviously, you think next weekend Broncos are going to hold rookie mini camp. We're going to be able to go there and watch, obviously, practice. Think we're going to have a chance to talk to Sean Payton. Maybe we'll get a chance to ask this question about that incident, you know, and what they've seen or what they've learned from him, and maybe why he's got a chance to compete for an NFL spot here. But, you know, I'm very curious. I mean, this is the one year, Sayre, I look at all these undrafted rookie free agents, and I start to think to myself, with how the roster is currently constructed, could this be the year the streak of a UDFA making the 53? Could this be the year that streak ends? I think on the defensive side of the ball, there's probably a greater chance of a player making the 53-man roster than there is essentially, I think, on the offensive side of the ball. So with that said, Broncos Country, still got a lot to break down here on today's episode of the show. We're going to focus on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to go through a couple of players, including a defensive lineman out of Mizzou, an edge rusher out of Mizzou, my alma mater, that has the opportunity to maybe impress a little bit and get some playing time this upcoming season or in preseason. We'll break that down much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, they are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of the action. And right now, when you join FanDuel and you place your first $5 bet, you will get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins.
No, I'm with you, Sayre. And the one thing I love about FanDuel is they make it so easy to place bets on your favorite teams, whether it's picking my favorite team or whether it's diving into individual player props for the NBA playoffs. There's other sports like the NHL playoffs as well. But whether it's from three-pointers to steals or assists, FanDuel, they have so many ways to bet on your favorite player props, especially as the playoffs get a little bit more spicy down the stretch. A couple of games knotted up in that series as you get ready for the next round of the Western Conference playoffs and even the Eastern Conference playoffs. FanDuel is the place to be for the NBA playoff action. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. The fourth quarter action of today's episode of Locked On Broncos is here. And before we get to the end of today's show, Broncos Country, want to say thanks once again for making us your first listen of the day, however you choose to do so. Thanks to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. We appreciate you so much for making the show exactly what it is. We just surpassed 17K on YouTube. We couldn't have done that without all of you. Continuing our undrafted rookie free agent discussion here. We were just talking about it before we got to this segment here about how the Broncos, this could be the year where they don't have a 53-man roster spot go to an undrafted rookie free agent. I mean, the Broncos have had a really good streak over the last handful of years. I mean, it seems like every year. And of course, they bring in Cody Roark from the New Orleans Saints, where that was also something that happened in New Orleans with he and Sean Payton. So could that trend continue here this year? It's with the roster currently set as is. It's hard to see that happening, especially with the depth pieces the Broncos added in the NFL drafts there. But one guy at edge rusher kind of stood out to me, and that was Johnny Walker Jr. out of the University of Missouri. Is there any player out here that stood out to you as well?
Yeah, Johnny was one of those guys that stood out to me as well, Cody, because I think that you look at guys who can rush the passer as always when you come into the undrafted free agent ranks, and you say, hey, you got an opportunity typically in the preseason to get after the quarterback and kind of just make it impossible to cut you. That's what happened with a number of guys in the past for the Denver Broncos, and you never know when that can happen again. I think also maybe the clearest path on the position group side of things is at off-ball linebacker, where I know JB Brown from Kansas, and I think it's Kareen Reed, Cody, from Utah. I'll need to learn how to pronounce all these guys' names, but the linebacker from Utah who had a draftable grade according to NFL.com as well. Those two guys, they could impress. And special teams, as we know, with the new kickoff rules, I think those guys stand as good of a chance as any to make a case during the preseason when you're getting opportunities out there on the kickoff coverage unit to say, hey, like, you need to keep us on this roster because we're going to go out there and make every play on special teams, constantly coming into frame. So the two linebackers and Johnny Walker, the edge out of Mizzou, they stand out to me. But the Broncos also added a couple D linemen and a handful of corners as well.
Yeah, look, and look, I think the nose tackle position is one of those positions that people are saying is kind of dying off. I think it was Mike Tomlin actually, before the NFL draft, was asked a question, and he had mentioned that the nose tackle position is a hard one to find in today's NFL because so many defensive schemes are evolving, but more so, it's hard to find guys that can really eat up that much attention, to eat up how big offensive lines are in today's game. Christian Dow out of UT Martin is going to get an opportunity to do that. He's going to compete, I think, with Jordan Miller, who was on the roster. He was on the Broncos practice squad last season as a true nose tackle designation here. You know me, I'm a defensive back guy. I think Jaden Robinson out of Oregon State, Joshua Pickett out of Duke. These are two names to keep an eye on here because I think you've got a combination of guys who have speed at the cornerback position, but you also have physicality. And that's the one thing when I look at Jaden Robinson's game, he's a corner who's not shy of, a way of playing physical. You look at Oregon State throughout the last handful of years has had a really good defense. They've been great against the run. They've been stellar against the pass. So I'm curious to see what adding, three cornerbacks into the mix here as undrafted rookie free agents to come in for training camp. This could obviously change, right? Because obviously with rookie minicamp coming up, you're going to have some other guys invited from some of these smaller schools. But at this point too, the Broncos, they're also going to decide who they want essentially on their training camp roster, right? They're building up to 90. I think they're really close to that, considering the NFL draft, considering the guys that they've signed so far in undrafted rookie free agency. But a lot of these spots aren't necessarily guaranteed just yet. And I'm very, very curious. We haven't got the information yet. I'm curious to see who gets the highest signing bonus. That's always the fun game to play. Who gets the highest signing bonus as an undrafted rookie free agent? But Denver really just adding a lot of depth pieces here. They're going to come in and compete, which, isn't a bad thing. You might be able to find a gem here, I think, on the defensive side in comparison to offense.
Yeah, this is really a look ahead at who's going to be on your practice squad, most likely, or who are the guys that are going to impress enough to be on your practice squad. And we know that those guys do get shuffled up to the roster throughout the course of the season. So being a practice squad player is not necessarily a, hey, we'll see you in 2027 sort of thing. It's a potentially we'll see you this year. You just never know. I mean, we saw a number of guys that I think were off-season roster players for the Broncos at, safeties like Keidron Smith, Devin Key. I think a lot of folks would have said, hey, those guys are off-season fodder. Like, they're camp bodies. They're going to come out there and they're just going to be practice squad players. And they ended up playing for the team. So it's interesting always when these guys, they get an opportunity, it's impossible to write these guys off. And so I don't mind the additions the Broncos made, Cody. I think in terms of UDFAs, this is the type of class that, man, we just really have to see some of these guys in the preseason to see what they put on tape, because it's not a star-studded class in terms of oh shoot, like that guy fell out of the draft and the Broncos got him. It's not one of those classes. It's not, I don't know that there's a single player on there other than, like we talked about, Clay Webb in the previous segment, that had a decently high draft grade. And so it's one of those that's the scouting department. Their fingerprints are all over this kind of a UDFA class for Denver.
Well, I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. And obviously, rookie minicamp, we talk about that, is coming up. And as we're recording, Sayre texted over a tweet here from Tom Pelissero as we're going through here. It says, former Bengals running back Chris Evans will participate in Broncos rookie minicamp on a tryout basis. He's a former 6th-round pick out of Michigan in 2021. He appeared in 34 games over his first 3 seasons in Cincinnati before he missed 2024 with a ruptured patella tendon. He's now ready to be a full go, according to Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. So an interesting addition, potentially, in a tryout guy here. I think that's going to also be very key. Like, who are the tryout players? Who are the Broncos players, essentially, that were on the roster last year that come back for rookie minicamp, right? You want to see a longer look. I think it's already been talked about, Sayre, about Blake Watson being one of those names. So I'm very curious to see who else is added to the mix here for the Broncos as rookie minicamp approaches. We'll have you covered every step of the way leading up to that as well, though. Broncos Country, we appreciate you so much for rocking with us, tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're a brand new viewer or listener of the show and you want to become an everydayer, do it by hitting that subscribe to that follow button. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we got you covered every single day, all year long, as it pertains to what's going on with your favorite team. Don't forget to check us out every single day. Make that part of your routine. But Broncos Country, the NFL draft has concluded. You've got undrafted rookie free agents coming in. So now, Sayre and myself, for tomorrow's episode of the show, we're opening our mailbag, and we want a letter from you. Send in your Broncos question. We'll find the best ones. We'll answer it here on tomorrow's episode of the show. Broncos Country, we'll see you then.